On today's video, I want to talk about why I don't think specs on paper really matter when it comes to comparing bikes, especially when they're in the same category. So, thanks for stopping by and watching the video. Remember, if you haven't already subscribed, to go ahead and hit that subscribe button and hit that thumbs up, tap that little bell notification thing. Well, especially if you already have that bell notification thing tapped to get notifications when I post videos, double check and make sure that thing is still on, because well, ever since my channel got hacked by whoever, I know a lot of people out there just aren't getting the notifications. But anyways, on today's video, that's what the topic's going to be about. My opinion on specs on paper when comparing motorcycles. I still love that sound when this bike cranks up and fires up and you feel it come to life. Man, there's nothing like that sound. So anyways, I got to thinking this morning, I knew I wanted to go for a ride, but like anybody with multiple motorcycles knows, when you got multiple bikes sitting in your garage, people always wave at Harleys. It's awesome. When you got multiple motorcycles sitting in your garage, sometimes you just can't decide which bike you want to take out for a ride. And I got to thinking, well, my bikes right now are kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum. I have this big Harley Davidson cruiser. Well, it's not the biggest, but it's a big cruiser. So I got the big Harley cruiser, and then sitting right next to it in the garage is a little tiny 125cc Honda Monkey and a Honda Grom. And sometimes it's kind of tough to choose which one I want to take out. So it brings me around to my point of this video, that motorcycle specs to me just don't really matter. I mean, they just don't. When you compare the two side by side, they're nothing alike. But when you're talking about fun factor and bang for the buck, it's hard to decide which one's better. So I know a lot of guys, you know, and I've done it myself, can get kind of caught up in all the numbers on paper and looking at specs on the websites and things, and oh, rough road. You just kind of get caught up in all that stuff when you're looking for a bike to buy, because you know, most of us, we have to have more than one bike, and ideally most of us can afford more than one bike. I mean, I honestly think that as a motorcycle enthusiast, if you only have one bike, then you're kind of, you know, you're just kind of missing out. So when you get online and you compare specs from this bike to that bike, trying to decide which one you want, because you can only have one, it makes it really pretty difficult when you're just sitting there staring at the numbers. I mean, the numbers just don't tell the whole experience, you know, because every motorcycle, you know, even if you put them side by side, as I've stated before about this Street Bob, two identical motorcycles side by side can feel completely different. You'd think, you know, like the most wealthy neighborhood in town would have the nicest streets. But man, that is just not the case around here. Well, why would you buy a Harley Davidson for, say, $15,000 when you can get a bike that costs half as much, that performs better? And this is where the whole numbers thing comes into play. You just can't judge a motorcycle by what you read online. You really have to go out there and test ride them to get the feel for a bike, because they're all different. You could take something like an Iron 883 and compare it next to the Kawasaki Vulcan S. You know, similar price point. The Iron's a little bit more expensive, a couple $1,000s more expensive. But you could arguably say that the Vulcan S would outperform the Iron 883. I mean, it's cheaper, it gets better fuel economy, probably handles the corners better, is probably faster, I don't know. But then you look at it from the outside, why are so many people choosing the Iron 883 over the Vulcan S? And I don't have, you know, off the top of my head sales figures for both of those bikes, but you know, that just tells you that there's something about the Iron 883 that people really, really love. So numbers or not, it doesn't really matter. See, to me, what's really important about a bike is the way it makes me feel. And that's one of the main reasons why I traded off my Vulcan S in favor of Harley Davidson. The Vulcan S just wasn't cutting it for me, you know, as far as like, you know, feeling something for the bike. So I knew that I needed something that was gonna kind of, you know, re-spark my want to go out and ride. So I think that's really, really important when you buy a bike. That's something that not only puts a smile on your face, but makes you look forward to riding it when you're not riding it. I mean, since I've bought this bike, I could be at work, you know, any given day of the week. And when I'm not concentrated on working, you know, I'm thinking about wanting to come ride this bike. Because it's, you know, you start to bond with a motorcycle the more you ride it. And it just kind of becomes part of you, you know. And I guess that's, you know, a lot of the reasons why cruiser riders, you know, they kind of dress the part. You know, a lot of them, they'll wear the little half helmet, leather jacket, you know, the jeans. They'll kind of look the part of their bike. And it's not necessarily that, you know, they dressed that way before they bought the bike. It's that the bike kind of created them, you know, as a character, as your kind of your persona. It's your escape from reality. It's your escape from home life. You know, your escape from stress and bills and everything else. The same thing goes for the ADV rider guys. I mean, how many times have you been riding around in town and you've seen an ADV guy out riding around with his full ADV gear on? You know, they wear that stuff because it's kind of, it fits the part. Just like the cruiser guys. So if you're looking to buy a motorcycle and you're kind of tossing it up, you know, from one spec to the other, you know, this bike gets this amount of gas mileage, or this one has this much power, or, you know, this one weighs a lot more than that one, just kind of disregard all that stuff, man, and just go out and ride the bike and see what it's like. You know, feel it for yourself, just so you can kind of get the experience of that bike. Because I think that's really the only way of knowing whether or not a bike is good. You know, it can have the best specs on paper, you know, sitting there screaming at you, you know, it's like, oh, this thing does this and does that, and it stops really super quick, and it's super fast, it gets good gas mileage and everything. But what if you went out and rode that bike and your heart was set on it and you totally hated it? I mean, that's why it's important to swing a leg over it and test ride it first. Now, admittedly, I have bought bikes like my Ninja 300 I bought before I rode it. My Vulcan S I bought before I rode it. And it turned out to not be a mistake, but can you imagine if I had paid for either one of those bikes and got it back to my house and realized that I hated it? It would have absolutely sucked. You know, I know I made a video talking about that I hated this bike to begin with, but it was simply because of the way it was set up. Things that are easily changeable. You know, and even on paper, you know, you look at this bike on paper, okay, it weighs like 650 pounds, which is kind of heavy for a supposedly lightweight cruiser. And it's got a tiny little gas tank, you know, by some measures, I guess. But that didn't tell the full story of this bike, not at all. And I am totally glad that I went down and test rode that other Street Bob, because who knows, you know, if that Street Bob wasn't sitting on the showroom floor and I didn't test ride it, I probably would still have my Vulcan. You know, it was just the experience of riding that bike that convinced me that I wanted one really bad. You know, and I have to say, this whole thing of specs not really being all that important is especially true when it comes to Harley Davidsons. Because there was a lot of misconceptions that I had myself before I bought one about Harley Davidsons, but we'll wait for another video to talk about all that stuff. But if you look at a Harley Davidson and you say, wow, those things are freaking heavy, they don't get all that great of gas mileage, and they're expensive, and that sways you away from buying a Harley, just do yourself a favor. Go down and ride one. You might be pleasantly surprised. Anyways, I want to thank you guys for stopping by the video and checking it out once again. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. And remember, if you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Tap that little thumbs up thingy. It really helps my channel out. And remember, check your notifications. Make sure they're turned on and everything. So anyways, I'm going to get out there and go for a nice long ride on this beautiful day. So thank you for watching the video once again, everybody. Until we see you on the next one, everybody ride safe and have a good day, and we will talk at you later.